Lithuania may be one of the smaller members of the European Union, but it just did something huge for Ukraine, reaffirming its commitments to Kyiv and cementing its status as one of the country's most reliable and steadfast allies. Even Russia cannot believe the levels that Lithuania is willing to go to in order to support Ukraine and counteract Moscow's aggression. And if other countries across Europe follow this nation's example, then the Kremlin's war machine could be in far greater trouble than anyone anticipated. The news came on October 28th, when the recently elected Speaker of the Sejm Mass of Lithuania, Juozas Olekas, made his first visit to Ukraine in his new role. Olekas has spent time in the past as Lithuania's Minister of National Defense and as a member of the European Parliament. So it's a long career in politics and a strong understanding of both diplomacy and national security. During his time in Ukraine, Olekas met with multiple officials, including Ruslan Stefanchuk, chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament, Denys Shmyhal, the Minister of Defense, and the country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky. He also took the time to sit down with local journalists to answer questions and discuss in detail what Lithuania was doing to help the Ukrainian cause. During these multiple meetings, Olekas spoke about his vision of a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. He also discussed ways to accelerate the country's accession into the European Union along with matters related to security cooperation, joint arms production, and participation in international coalitions. The same speaker also made two enormous announcements to Ukraine's leadership and to the wider world. First, he had a message for the Kremlin, proudly proclaiming that Lithuania will never recognize the annexation of Ukrainian regions. It will never see territories like Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk as being part of Russia, no matter what dirty tricks Russia employs or how the war pans out. Lithuania will continue to stand with Ukraine both now and into the future. And Olekas argued that the country should not face any pressure at all to simply give up its land to its enemy as part of a potential peace deal. This matters a great deal because Putin doesn't just want to take land from Ukraine. He wants to expand his sphere of power and influence on the global stage. That's why he has so desperately sought to convince both his own people and other countries around the globe that Russia's actions in Ukraine are right and just that it has the authority and even the obligation to invade places like DT and make them a part of Russia. He wants to attach a sense of legitimacy to his so-called special military operation so that when it eventually ends, the wider world will acknowledge these territories as belonging to Russia and allow the Kremlin to retake its place in world politics. But if nations say no, if they continue to call out Russia's actions for what they are, entirely unjustified incursions involving an ever-expanding list of war crimes, then the Kremlin will never be able to achieve its end goals. It will never return to its pre-war trade agreements with countries across Europe and North America. It will never reclaim its position at the table of international relations. And the world will never simply forgive, forget, and move on from this ugly mess. Instead, it will continue to punish Russia day in and day out while reaffirming support for Ukrainian sovereignty. And if that happens, then Russia will never ever win this war. Because even if it were to somehow achieve its battlefield objectives and capture the territories it lays claim to, it will suffer the consequences of those actions for generations to come. Its people, businesses, banks, elites, and leaders will pay the price forevermore. Ukraine, meanwhile, will continue to receive support and compassion from its vast array of allies worldwide. It's up to other countries now to follow Lithuania's example and proclaim clearly and conclusively that they too will never under any circumstances see places like Kherson and Luhansk as belonging to Russia. But it was Olekas's second statement that truly sent a shock wave across Kyiv and much further all the way to Moscow itself. After stating that sanctions on Russia must be increased, the Lithuanian Parliament speaker said, "However, we see no signs that Russia is ready to end this war. Only a change in the balance of power can force Russia to seek peace." He then went on to announce a huge pledge of support from Donetsk to Kyiv. "I assured my colleagues in the Ukrainian Parliament of strengthened military and political support for Ukraine, as well as providing reliable security guarantees. Our military support for Ukraine will continue at a level of no less than 0.25% of GDP. That means that Lithuania promises to provide at least 0.25% of its entire gross domestic product, the total value of all goods and services produced in the country each year to Ukraine. Not just now, but into the future as well. While 0.25% may seem a small percentage, it's enormous when taken in this context. For reference, 0.25%, 25% of the United States GDP would be around $73 billion based on 2024's total GDP of $29.18 trillion. Of course, Lithuania is a much smaller and far less prosperous nation than the U.S. In 2024, its GDP amounted to $84.87 billion, according to data from the World Bank. As such, 25% of that figure is around $212 million. In September, Rexelina Pidlasa, the chair of the Budget Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament, revealed that it cost Ukraine around $172 million per day to defend its land from Russia. Defense has an enormous financial cost to our country, and it keeps rising. Exactly 1 year ago, I was standing in this room and I told you that one day of war costs Ukraine's state budget $140 million. Now, it costs $172 million every day. This figure includes soldiers' salaries, ammunition, and weaponry, but also something you might not expect when thinking about the cost of war. Ukraine continues to provide financial support for injured soldiers, those missing in action, and the families of the fallen. She went on to add that Ukraine currently spends 31% of its GDP on defense, which is more than any other nation on earth. Before announcing her hopes that Ukraine could secure $120 billion for defense in 2026, Pidlasa noted that half of that sum, $60 billion, would come from Ukraine's own state budget, with the remaining half hopefully being provided by the country's allies through various support schemes and initiatives like Pearl and SAFE. When compared to those kinds of figures, Lithuania's annual donation of $212 million obviously isn't enough to make a massive impact on its own. It barely covers Ukraine's reported defense costs for a single day. But it's important to look at the broader picture here. There's no doubt that Lithuania is evidently unable to impact the war on a massive scale on its own. It doesn't have the economic clout or financial firepower to turn the tide of the battlefield. Nor does it have the military might to send game-changing weapons or defense technologies to keep fighters along the front lines of regions like Donetsk and Luhansk. It understands that. But just like Ukraine in many ways, Lithuania wants to do the best job it can with the limited resources at its disposal. And the best way for this Baltic state to influence the outcome of the war is not by donating staggering amounts of money or providing fancy fighter jets and high-end missile systems. Instead, its aim is much simpler: to set an example for other richer,